Hi, it's Dave Hahn from CoachThatThrows.com, and I'm excited to come to you once again with another great training program. In today's presentation, I'm going to cover the fundamentals of coaching. And we all know that we have to know the X's and the O's of our sport. And I know when I was getting started, I thought all I needed to know was good technique, and based on that, I would have great throwers. And obviously, after 10 years of coaching now at the collegiate level, I've kind of learned that there's other things besides technique that need to go into it. So these fundamentals, they're universal. They apply to basically every sport, every event level, and whatever you're coaching or however you're working with young people, these apply to any physical situation. So for some of you, this will probably be a review, but it's always a great concepts to review and to go over and just to keep in the front of your mind. So let's start by talking about the three laws of training. You've probably heard of these before. The three laws are the law of overload, the law of reversibility, and the law of specificity. And let's spend a little bit of time going on into each one here. The law of overload, this basically says that when a load is placed on the body becomes fatigued, which leads to an overcompensation, and with proper loading and recovery, that leads to improvement or improved performance. So the goal of our training is to provide the body with progressive overload to lead to that optimal overcompensation or increase in performance. Obviously, once you put a stress on the body, that's going to deteriorate the body, break it down a little bit, but then it recovers even stronger. And by this chart, you can see that if this is our baseline here, once you add a stimulus to the body, it does fatigue and goes down, and then with proper rest, and rest is important. You can't go all out every day nonstop. You need that rest to recover, and then your body overcompensates. And then if you fail to continue to train, you're going to go back down to this baseline again. So you want to add another load, which will bring it down, hopefully not quite as far, and then that recovery process will continue in an upward arc like we see here. So obviously there's no hard data shown here, but you can see kind of the general way we want to go. You'll start, this would be a training session, recovery, another training session, recovery, another training session, and then obviously you want this to be your peak or your competition level here where you're at the top of your fitness level. So the law of reversibility states that if loading is spaced too far apart, the body will return to its pre-training state. Pretty common sense. Just like everybody knows, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So the training sessions should be completed on a systematic and consistent basis. So you need to plan out your training. You should have a plan for the whole season laid out beforehand so that you know exactly where you're going. And just because you have it written out doesn't mean it's set in stone. You can make changes as you go, but you got to have a plan of how you want to get to that end state. So if we look at the law of reversibility, you can see if the training is spaced too far apart, basically you're just starting over every time from scratch. You're never making any gains. And if the training is too close, you'll actually see a decrease in performance because you're never allowed to recover. The athlete can never have enough chance to recover, which leads to overtraining, usually leads to injuries and other situations there. So training space too close is bad, too far is bad. We want the right level for optimal improvement. And this varies based on a lot of different things. The biological age, the training age, the ability or talent level, all of those things, the type of activity that you're doing, all of those things come into play, and that's what you've got to take into account when you're planning your training season. Now, the law of specificity refers to the fact that each athlete and each event is unique. So loads must be specific to the individual athlete and his chosen event. So basically, what does that say to us as throws coaches? Throwers are not the same as distance runners. Now, that's not to say that throwers should never run, but we're not going to train throwers the same way we would train a distance runner. And we're not going to train a first year 150-pound shot putter the same way we would train a fourth year 230-pound hammer thrower. It's just you got to make things different for the athlete and the situation. So obviously we're going to train our throwers differently than the rest of the event groups, but we also need to break down and individualize the workouts within our group. We can't cookie cut athletes and expect all the athletes to fit into the same mold that we want our group to be in. Obviously, there are things that the group can do together, but there are going to have to be phases in your training that are geared towards specific athletes. So some of the additional principles that we want to touch on besides the three laws that we just covered, we have the principle of variety and the principle of active involvement. And the principle of variety, pretty common sense. To prevent overtraining and overuse injuries, you want to have a variety of activities and training situations. And this is common sense. It goes with just about everything we do. You don't want to be doing the same thing every day. So if working with our throwers, we don't want them doing the exact same drill 100 times a day, 7 days a week for the entire training season. We want to vary the types of drills we do, the types of activities we do, and we also want to get away from track-based activities. So that may be that you spend a day a week in the pool, or you play a game once every couple of weeks, or you play baseball or flag football or rugby or things like that. Lots of different activities and training situations just to keep a variety of activity, keep things fun, and keep the athletes interested. And the principle of active involvement, this just says that the athlete must want to actively and willingly participate and must believe in and commit to the training program. So in order for an athlete to be successful, first of all, they have to be there on their own free will. And you'll see this a lot in high school where athletes are just there because their friends are out or maybe their parents want them to play the sport. And those athletes generally aren't going to make a whole lot of tremendous gains in their athletic career. So they really have to believe in and commit to the training program. And that's why, you hear the stories of walk-on athletes on scholarship programs like the Rudies of the world. Those athletes truly believe in and they commit 100% to the training program. And that's not to say that everybody can reach that same level, but that's what it takes to get to that level. So based on those laws and principles, we want to keep some basic teaching concepts in mind. Let's start with these four major teaching concepts. First of all, we want to teach big movements before small movements. We want to go from simple to complex tasks. We want to provide variety, and we want to practice under competition conditions. So what does that mean to us as throws coaches when working with our athletes? First of all, obviously, teach the bigger movements before the smaller movements. So when we're working with the throws, the shot put, the discus, the hammer, the javelin, we want to teach the power position, the fundamental things that the athletes can then build on and add more movements to, and then start splitting the hairs from there. And that kind of goes along with simple to complex tasks. So usually the power throw is the most basic, and then we'll build there. I usually start with the power position and move backwards to the entry and then into the full throws. We want to provide a variety. So lots of different drills, different implements and things to throw, and also different cues. So not different cues to confuse them, but different ways of saying the same thing, and maybe a couple of different people saying the same thing, but just a little bit different choice of words. You never know what's going to click in the athlete's mind and allow them to understand that concept. And then practice under competition conditions. So that means We don't want to exclusively throw competition implements, but we do want to practice with them. Um, we want to practice in the same type of circle that we would compete in the same competition. If all of our competitions are going to be outdoors in the snow, then we should practice outdoors in the snow. If all of them are going to be inside on a wood circle, then we should practice inside on a wood circle. So, pretty common sense there. We want to make sure that we're keeping those four concepts in mind during all of our practice situations. So from there, let's go into the 3 stages of learning. And this is across the board. Anybody who's learning anything, they go through these 3 stages. And we have the thinking stage, the learning stage, and the skilled stage. So athletes or learners in the thinking stage, the learner visualizes the action, and they must know the final objective of the skill. So you have to explain what are you trying to do so that the athlete can then visualize what they're supposed to do. So in the power throw, we want the athlete to set up in a proper heel toe position, wind back so that the shoulders are squared to the back of the circle, and then push the hip through so that the hips are square to the throwing direction, and then release the implement out in a nice trajectory. So we would explain that, let them visualize that, show a demonstration of that, and then let them continue to process that in their mind. In the learning stage then, that's when the learner is testing strategies to complete the skill. So you want to tie the skill into previous experiences and skills that they are already proficient in. If we go back to our power position demonstration, most athletes are familiar with a baseball swing. So if you tell them that in order to swing, you need to turn your hips. You're not just swinging with your hands. You turn the back foot and the hip and get into the swing. And that's the same thing we would tie that into when we're introducing the power position, is you need to start with the feet, push that hip through, and then let the arms come through and whip or swing and drive the shot put or the discus into the direction of the throw. Now, in the skilled stage, the skill can be performed consistently. So now is the time to focus on the timing and the rhythm of the movement. So now the athlete has had enough time to visualize it. They've actually completed the skill, and they're familiar with it, where they can do the same thing over and over. So now we want to focus on the rhythm of the power position. They are in the correct positions. They can throw successfully. So now we want from slow to fast. So during the 3 stages of learning, every athlete progresses through these stages differently. So I know you always want the athlete to learn it as quickly as we can. And sometimes that's frustrating that some athletes pick it up right away, when others you can tell them the same thing 1,000 times and they just can't make that change. But you have to understand that every athlete has different skills and abilities, and they progress through those stages differently. So once the athlete reaches the skilled stage, now it's time to incorporate that skill into competition situations. So once again, when you have your group of athletes all in that skilled stage, then have a practice competition. So if you're focused on the power position, like we've kind of been mentioning, and everybody's into that skilled stage now you can have a competition who can throw the farthest, or who can take the most attempts without fouling, or who can throw the farthest and grunt the loudest. So different competition situations that you can incorporate that can then tie into a meet situation. So there's different steps in teaching a skill, and these are fairly universal. You want to stick pretty close to these steps when you're teaching a new skill. So first of all, obviously you want to introduce the skill. You don't want to demonstrate yet. Just explain the what and the why. So what are you expecting the athletes to do, and why do you want them to do it? Then you want to demonstrate, and demonstrate at least 3 or 4 times without speaking. Allow the athletes to see the skill being performed correctly, and let them soak it in. So 3 or 4 times so that they can focus on different things. Um, Maybe give them a cue each time or every couple of times you do it. This time look at my feet. This time look at my upper body. This time look at what my hips are doing. So those things. And if you're going to demonstrate, make sure that you can demonstrate correctly, or have somebody demonstrate that you can watch, so that you can ensure that it's done correctly. And if it's not done correctly, you can make sure to make the adjustment right away so that the athlete knows what they should be looking for. Next, practice the skill. So I have all the athletes get up, practice the skill. Don't give any feedback yet. Just allow them that kinesthetic problem solving. Let them kind of figure out what they're supposed to be doing and how to achieve that result that you are asking them for. And then finally, provide feedback. So let them know what they're doing correctly and how to correct mistakes. And obviously, we want to provide more positive feedback than negative feedback. Just basic etiquette here. We want to compliment them as much as possible. We don't want to blow smoke up their ass, but if you see them doing something right, make sure to point that out. And just because they're doing a lot of things incorrectly doesn't mean you need to point out all of those things at once. Usually it's always one major factor that leads to a bunch of other secondary problems. So focus on that major error first and allow the rest of it to be cleaned up because of that one correction. So some cues for coaching to keep in mind when you're working with your athletes. First of all, you want to teach simply. Make it as simple as possible. Nobody likes an overcomplicated explanation of anything. And especially when you're working with athletes, most athletes are very visual learners. So they like to see exactly what they need to do. And usually if they see it, that's all they need. They don't need a whole lot of explanation. Second, make sure that you're practicing within the athlete's limits. You'll probably have a wide range of ability levels within your crew of athletes, especially with throwers. You generally have a wide range of ability levels. Some athletes are overweight and they're just out for the sport to lose weight, and some want to be national or conference or regional champions, and kind of all the way in between there. So you got to really keep in mind what the athlete's limits are, what their goals are, and structure your practices so that everybody can meet their own goals and stay within their own limits. Encourage a wide range of movements, and this injury prevention, as well as kinesthetic problem solving, all of those things, you want to encourage a wide range of movements and different activities. Generally, the more athletically balanced an athlete is, the better athlete they are, the better they're performing in any type of athletic situation. So you always want to encourage a wide range of movements. And that goes with cross training as well, just to improve the athletic base of the student athlete. Number 4, make sure you don't expect too much too soon. You can't come out the first day of practice and expect everybody to be throwing exactly where they left off the season before. That's just not the way it works. A lot of athletes won't do much during the summer or during the off season, so you got to take it back from the beginning and build from there. Those that are upperclassmen, usually they progress through it a little bit faster than they did the year before, and that's what you want to see. But don't expect too much too soon. Just allow it to happen and be patient with it. Number 5, make sure you don't give too much to think about. And you'll see this very often at meets. You'll see coaches talk to an athlete when they're in the circle and they'll give them 5 different cues. Make sure you stay in bounds. Make sure you don't fall out the circle. Turn your foot at 90 degrees. All of these things, when the athlete's getting ready to throw, and it just freezes them up. Give the athlete, if they need a cue, give them one thing to think about when they're in the circle, and that should be it. Otherwise, all of that stuff should have been taken care of in practice. When you're at a competition, that's not the time to think. And even in practices, you want to focus on 2 to 3 cues tops that you're focusing on in that practice. So if one day you're focused on a specific movement, you want to focus on that movement. And then later in the week, maybe you'll focus on the rhythm and the timing to get that movement to sync up within the throw. So you don't want to focus on a movement and the rhythm all in one day. That's just too much to think about for the athlete. So uh, don't give the athlete too much to think about. Number 6, point out the important points to focus on. So generally, in any explanation, you're going to give a bunch of different things to look at or to think about. And you want to make sure to focus on the key points. So in the throw, generally, we talk about the entry, balance on the entry, stay tight through the middle, and turn through the power position, or sling it and whip it. Don't hit the discus or try to throw the shot too soon. So focus on those important points, and from there, the athlete knows when you're breaking things down further in practice, they know how to put those things back together again. Next, make sure to help the athlete self-evaluate. So make sure you're not always telling them what they're doing. Create a dialogue with them so that you hear what they feel that they're doing. Sometimes what they feel is completely different than what you're seeing, and maybe sometimes what you're seeing is their particular style and something that can't be changed just because their body type or their technique. Um, so a lot you want to hear them if that felt really good for them, uh, adjust from there. Or if it felt bad and you thought it was good, you can adjust from there and make sure that you're both on the same page. And also, you want to just let the athlete know that generally in a meet situation, you can't be by their side for every single throw. If you're working with a large group of throwers uh, and probably different event groups as well, generally you can't see a lot of the throws. So they have to be self-sufficient. If they know that they're falling out of the circle, they need to know that they need to wrap up better in the middle, or just different cues like that where they know how to self-evaluate in situations. And finally, make sure you be positive. This is a sport, this is a game. You want to have fun, and you want your athletes to have fun. Everybody, you want to make it a positive experience, and we want people to continue with the throws beyond their current competition level. So if you're in middle school, obviously you want those athletes to continue on into high school, and from high school you want them to continue on into college, and from college we want them to continue on, if not at elite levels, then at the master's level, or continue participating in state level track meets, the Badger State Games, those type of events, to continue to keep the sport alive, um, and just continue to enhance the sport. So let's get more into some biomechanics now. And basically, all biomechanics are based on Newton's three laws of motion. So his three laws of motion, we have the first law: all bodies continue in a state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless acted upon by an outside force. Second, the acceleration of a body is proportional to the force causing it and takes place in the direction it acts, or force equals mass times acceleration. And the third law: to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So these are the three fundamental principles that we're dealing with physics-wise when we're working with the throws. And basically any type of athletic movement is based on these three laws. So what does this mean to us in the throws? First of all, both feet must be in contact with the ground to accelerate the implement. Uh, if you think about trying to throw off of one leg or in the air, you cannot accelerate the implement that way. So in order to create acceleration of the system, that has to come with 2 feet on the ground. That means to have a consistent power position and drive phase off of the power foot into the release of the implement. Rob Lasorsa, he likes to use this quote: "You can't shoot a cannon out of a canoe." And that means you have to start from the lower body and work your way up. If you think about just throwing shoot a cannon out of a canoe, it's going to flip the canoe right over. You got to have a solid base and work the ground. Uh, so you got to be in contact with the ground. You need gravity to be able to throw. Try to throw on the moon. chances are it's not going to go real successful unless you're tied down to the ground, because as you push on the implement, it's also pushing back on you. Force equals mass times acceleration. So the mass of the implement is going to stay the same, and we can't change that throughout the throw. So in order to achieve more force, either we need to increase the acceleration. That's what we're working on technique. Um, the goal of our training is to increase the acceleration of the implement, and provided we have fundamentally sound technique, the trajectory and all of that should stay the same, so that if we increase acceleration, the implement should travel farther, which is our goal. So we have two different types of motion in the throws. We have linear motion, or straight lines, and we have rotary motion, which is turning around or rotating about an axis. So oftentimes when we do drills, we isolate one type of motion, or that's the attempt. So in the power position, generally, we don't take as much of a windup. We're focusing more of a straight line, throwing the shot put or the discus. Whereas if we're doing a wheel drill, that's working more rotational. We're working more turning the hips and getting more rotation into the movement. The end goal, and we have to make sure to keep the end goal in mind at all times. The end goal of all drills is to develop more efficient technique leading to longer throws. So the goal of a drill is not to make that particular drill go farther, not necessarily, but it is to help build the technique. So it's not necessary. We do want to do drills. It's not necessary to do perfect drills all the time and nothing but drills. You got to make sure that you're taking those drills back to the full technique and incorporating what you learned in the drills into the full technique to increase your performance. So some biomechanical principles of the throws. Force must be applied in the proper direction. Obviously, if we want it to go in the direction of the sector, we need to apply force that direction. The athlete must apply force over the greatest range of motion. And to be successful, we want the longest, in the discus, we want the longest power position possible. So that means we want to land in double support with the discus is back as far as possible. The athlete must maintain proper body position. If you're out of balance, then you're going to fall, and generally you're going to fall out the front of the circle. So the athlete has to maintain proper body position to apply force over the longest range of motion. Must be slow to fast. And later on, we'll talk a little bit more about critical zones, and that's something that Brooks Johnson has talked about, the critical zones at each event, and that's when it's most important to accelerate. And for us, we want the implement. It doesn't matter how fast our body is traveling, but it does matter how fast the implement. We need to be concerned with the acceleration of the implement and not necessarily the acceleration of the body itself. And the acceleration of the implement has to go from slow to fast. So when we're in our initial windup, that should be slow. We continue moving faster, faster, faster until the power position, and that should be the implement should be accelerating at its fastest point at the point of release. That's our goal. And you want there to be a summation of all forces. So from the ground up, you want to use each muscle as long as possible throughout the body to provide for the longest throw as possible. So just a quick conclusion here. This is just a brief introduction into the actual science of coaching. Once again, these things can be taken into just about any event, any athletic situation. And while techniques and events will continue to change and evolve, these principles are going to be the same regardless of the sport or event you're coaching. So you want to familiarize yourself with these fundamentals and make sure that you continue to go back to those as you're planning your training and make sure that they're built into your training and to your everyday coaching. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next video, and we'll get into some more great training action.